So, coming back to our favorite theorist, Karl Polanyi, you mentioned Polanyi's counter movement yesterday, and I was wondering whether Polanyi identified agency in any social group or whether he spoke about society in general launching a counter movement. And if he did not identify a specific social group as being the site of agency, would peasantry become that social group in the coming years?
It's been a while since I've read Karl Polanyi's Great Transformation. However, he certainly did talk about agency. Now, I don't know how he dealt with agency in terms of social or popular movements. What he talked about partly was the enlightened self-interest of capital itself as being part of the motive for social protections. And so for those who aren't familiar with Polanyi's argument, his argument is that there is a double movement that is associated with capitalism. And that is, capitalism tends to be destructive towards certain kinds of inputs to capitalism itself. And those are inputs that are not produced for or by the market. And so self-regulation of the market does not apply to them, and therefore the market might overconsume them, might exploit them, and those are three. Labor, land, which includes nature and environment, and money, which includes financial systems. And what he says is that they tend to be destroyed by a market that does not produce them, will overconsume them, despite that they are essential inputs. And because they're essential inputs, it is the enlightened self-interest of capitalism that wants to apply social protections, environmental protections, and financial regulation. As we can see, even the enlightened self-interest of capitalism is never enough. The economic crash we just went through is a good example of a failure to regulate and put on protections to the financial system. What you also see is that the double movement then on the social side is also a reaction of labor to this tendency. So you have on the one hand capitalism, and the double movement is the social protections through social movements and through the enlightened self-interest of capitalism, or environmental protections or financial protections. But Nancy Fraser makes a really interesting and compelling argument that you have to look at the market as itself being an emancipatory force. Markets, I mean, they do bring goods, they do bring services, they do bring wealth in many ways. They're both emancipatory and destructive. And she argues that social protections themselves can be both productive and destructive, and that both of these movements, while it's a kind of natural social reaction and market reaction to protect the goods that the market is destroying, they both need to be subject to some form of social scrutiny. And she suggests as a formula for that what she calls participatory parity. That is to say, a kind of social evaluation through forms of representation in which engagement, not only in the discursive sense, is on an equal basis. Obviously, that's an ideal. That's not what is. And that is her model. And so she calls it the triple movement, where you have capitalism, social protections, and this cross-cutting issue of emancipatory movements. And she thinks, and I think it's a topic for research, and I think it's a very good insight, that there is a movement for emancipation, that there is demand for people to be represented in decisions over both the way markets affect them and the way government and state intervention and regulation affect them. And so I think that's a very nice model to hang many of the discussions we've seen during this meeting.
Thank you very much for sharing your time and knowledge with us. Thank you, Jesse.